Essay Podcast, a show featuring conversations with leading practitioners of videographic criticism. On today's show, I sit down with Maia, the YouTuber best known as Broey Deschanel. Before I get to my conversation with Maia, I first want to direct you to my newsletter, Notes on Videographic Criticism, which can be sent to your inbox every other Sunday. Each newsletter features a mix of original essays, video essay-related news and notes, short interviews, and more. You can subscribe to the free newsletter at thevideoessay.com or thevideoessay.substack.com. Please also consider supporting the show, the newsletter, and all of the other work that I do on Patreon at patreon.com/thevideoessay. Every other Monday, subscribers to my Patreon page get free, quote, videographic introductions, end quote, to certain moving image related topics. These are essentially video essay guides that will hopefully shape your viewing and introduce you to new subjects, directors, and films. If you'd like more information about me and the work that I do, please visit thevideoessay.com. And now, without further ado, here's my conversation with Maia. And now I am very pleased to be joined by Maia, who perhaps is better known to the hundreds of thousands of subscribers that she has on YouTube as Broey Deschanel. If you are at all familiar with the video essay landscape on YouTube, I'm sure you've encountered Maia's videos. Maia, welcome to the Video Essay Podcast. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Amazing. On the show, we start off with a first basic question, and that is, what is your origin story? When were you first introduced to video essays, and what inspired you to begin creating videos yourself? You know, were there any videos or video essayists that you encountered online that you watched and you're like, whoa, I have to try this myself?
Yeah, so I got into video essays around 2018. I kind of had a big hiatus from YouTube in terms of like in terms of using YouTube. I had watched it a lot as like a kid and then thought it was kind of lame. And then video essays kind of brought me back into that world. I just liked how they kind of made these difficult topics very accessible to people, and kind of bridged the gap between academia and like the public domain. And so in 2018, I was watching a lot of like Lindsay Ellis and Nerdwriter, and their videos are insanely entertaining. And I was already kind of inspired by them. And then I went to watch Blade Runner 2049. And I'm a huge Blade Runner fan, so I was very excited about it and I loved it. But I had a lot to say about it and like a lot of conflicting feelings. So I thought that was kind of the perfect avenue into YouTube. So I made that essay, and then it kind of got discovered by, I don't know if it's like the incel community or just MRAs, but just a lot of angry dudes. And I kind of got like harassed off YouTube basically.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So I kind of dipped out from there. And then a year later, my partner it sounds like it's such a lame origin story. Like I made this up, but he bought me a Yeti microphone, the one I'm using, for Christmas. And he was like, I think it'd be great if you started making video essays and taking it seriously, because I know that's like kind of what you want to do. And so I started and I made a video about Parasite, which in hindsight is very clickbaity and very grad school 101. But I made that, and I kind of made it at the perfect time because Parasite, like a month into it, won the Oscar. And so when it won the Oscar, the video ended up blowing up and going viral. And that I've just been kind of riding that wave since then. And ever since, I've just been making a video a month about different topics that interest me.
I love that origin story, even though part of it is terrifying. I'm so sorry that you had to go through that. Although your partner sounds really sweet. And where would we be without the Yeti microphone? It's what I'm also using. But the horrible incel online awfulness aside, one thing that you say that resonates with me about your origin story is you talk about this accessibility of the video essay as a format, right? Where it's this blending together of all these different types of sources, whether it's like a really sophisticated piece of scholarship or a news article or a social media post. And it really feels like a way to feel one's way around certain topics as they're first getting exposed to them. And I think that's something I definitely relate to when I first started making video essays, because the thought of like writing something down, submitting it to a publication felt so overwhelming as like a concept. So I was like, wait, you can self-publish on Vimeo and YouTube and interact with all these other people who don't claim to be so-called experts. So what led you, A, do you agree with that? It seems like you might. And what led you to YouTube specifically as a platform as opposed to maybe a Vimeo or something? What was it about YouTube specifically that you found so appealing?
Yeah, so I think, YouTube, I have my own thoughts about it now just because of kind of various experiences with the platform, being a creator on it, with like monetizing videos and stuff. But it is sold as this kind of democratized space where I think, I can do these kind of academic style essays, which is kind of like what I was doing in school, but without any of the institutional barriers. So like, applying to a magazine, you have to have a lot of expertise and like, pitching and stuff like that. And you really have to do the grunt work. Whereas YouTube kind of has this magical thing, especially right now. I think we're kind of getting it in this magical moment where you can go viral quite easily, actually. I think that there's like, it's not so saturated to the point where, there's too much going on it. It's kind of just at this peak moment. So I think that's kind of what I like about YouTube, is just that virality is really accessible on the platform. And I'm seeing like all these people kind of who are my peers in a way blowing up at the same time. And like, I'm seeing a lot of women of color, people of color kind of getting a voice on the platform that they wouldn't otherwise. In terms of other video sharing platforms, I mean, I've been approached by a lot of alternative video sharing networks. In terms of those, unfortunately, YouTube just has a monopoly, and it's just very hard to be allured by different platforms like that. With Vimeo, I'm not very experienced with Vimeo, but I've always kind of viewed it as like an industry tool, in the way that I know a lot of kind of small filmmakers and they put their videos on there because it doesn't have a lot of like YouTube has a lot of kind of posting barriers, like just in terms of like censorship and stuff. And I feel like Vimeo might not have that as much. And it's just a bit more friendly to creators who aren't YouTube creators is what I've kind of gotten from it. But I also don't use it a lot. So that's a very uneducated opinion.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally accurate. Like, I feel like I think of Vimeo as the place you go where maybe you want to have something embedded on your portfolio, or you want to send a video to a film festival or, something to that degree. And I think you make an important distinction because I feel like so often when we talk about YouTube, we're talking about the people who are on YouTube and not like the company. Because at the end of the day, it is like Google and a huge problematic terror of capitalism. And, there's a lot to unpack in what you just said. But I am curious, as you alluded to, that you are in this space now where you monetize your videos. And I see that you have ads and you get hundreds of thousands of views. And, in one of the first conversations on this podcast, I talked with Grace Lee, who runs the page What's So Great About That? And we were joking about like the algorithm TM, like the behemoth that no one really knows how it works or what it does. And I'm wondering how that YouTube's focus on virality and the algorithm shapes the content that you choose to create, or does it not? Take us inside how you choose a topic and all the different factors that influence the topic.
Yeah. So kind of multi-parts to my answer, but
yeah, I gave you a multi-part question, so that's kind of on me.
Well, I think, when I first started making videos, I was kind of just, because I wasn't making money, you're not really thinking about salience and like the salience of a topic. So like I made a video on Showgirls, which is essentially like algorithm poison. It's like so much nudity, so much swearing. So it's just all like everything you could imagine that would be censor fodder is in that movie. And I didn't care. And it's one of my favorite videos that I've ever made. And it ends up doing pretty well in the long run. But now, especially because one, I have a sponsor for each video because I'm only making one video a month and it's my full-time job. It's kind of like the video has to perform well. And there's a lot of pressure on it to do that. So I've been finding that I've been noticing a lot more what YouTube's kind of ethos is when it comes to art, and when it comes to media criticism. And I think it's a very conservative one. I think a lot of I feel like my content is very sex positive, and like I made a video about movies about stripping a couple months ago, and the video got demonetized and age restricted, which is like fair to an extent, but also if you're going to purport to be a democratized platform, that's completely contradicting the idea of like whatever, I don't want to say free speech, but freedom of expression. And I think that YouTube is very contradictory because at the end of the day, YouTube is a corporation and they're acting in corporate interests, essentially. So now like I'm trying to be a bit more restrained with the type of content I'm posting on YouTube. But I think that, this is why things like Patreon are so important, because if I can start posting other videos on Patreon, I'll have a lot more flexibility with the type of content I make, and I won't have to censor myself, because I think that is going to be the death of media criticism, is when we start having to censor ourselves. Like I find that very troubling. So I'm hoping to kind of post more, non-salient topics on Patreon for people to watch. But yeah, the algorithms definitely very much affected the type of content I make, which is quite upsetting to me. And I've talked to some other YouTubers. We have a Discord, and they were saying that like YouTube now also favors, like the algorithm favors frequency and consistency. So a lot of these like creators are facing extreme burnout because they're making like a video a week with the assumption that they're gonna, be penalized if they don't keep creating content. And I think that's so dystopian.
Yeah. Geez, that's incredibly bleak. And again, I think if there was any doubt that YouTube is a corporation, you've just provided several examples of that in your life. Because I think, I found myself doing this where when I hear, archivists give talks about preserving moving images or whatever have you, they're constantly saying YouTube is not an archive, right? It is not like a public entity, a public forum, or any of those things. You mentioned that YouTube has this conservative ethos, and the example you gave was videos about stripping. But I'm wondering, have there been any other examples of that you were particularly surprised by, or that the audience might be surprised that YouTube seems to want to discourage on the platform? Yeah.
So when I first started on YouTube, there was this huge kind of discourse about censorship of queer content. And I've noticed that like in my own videos, like I don't make videos specifically that are about like queer theory or anything like that, but there are a couple videos where I've kind of focused on that. Like I did one on killing Eve, and I named it Queering Eve. And someone in the comments was like, you should be careful using that word in a title, because that's like algorithm poison. I keep using that term. So that's like incredibly harmful, especially to the queer community. And then I don't know, like I've seen like some like people I know posting videos and they'll censor the word abuse in the video. And it's like, I think the problem with the algorithm is like black boxing. Like we have no idea what the rules of the algorithm are. So people are just guessing at this point. Like there's no list of words telling you what not to say. And like there are huge YouTubers out there who like swear in their videos, who make sex jokes, and they're not penalized. But then I feel like I'm penalized every time I, do anything. Like my ads are limited on almost every video. Not almost every video, but a lot of videos. And I think that it's just because we have no way of knowing, and because it's so random, it feels even more kind of restrictive in that way.
I think I have 70 YouTube subscribers, so I wouldn't say that I'm a YouTube influencer. So when you get to someone at your level where you have a large audience, does YouTube reach out? Or do you have conversations with people there as trying to, because it's not your job to fix this, but I'm wondering, is it your sense that YouTube takes proactive steps to try to make this better? And I guess my question is, have you seen it improve over time, and do you have faith that it will improve?
I mean, not to be absolutely so negative, but I honestly think it's getting worse. Like I just had in my most recent video a news segment copyrighted, and I had to take the video down and repost it. Like it was unlisted, but I had to repost it again without the segment. I've had girls who, like, I was talking to one of my fellow creators, and she said that music videos, just the visuals of a music video, will be copyrighted now. And a lot of the time when you appeal the copyright claim, they can just take down your whole channel. Like they can take a really disproportionate measure against you to scare you out of actually appealing anything. So I think I'm a little worried that it's getting worse, but I will say that YouTube does have a really good system, like a chat system. So whenever I've run into some serious problems with videos, like I'll go to it's like a creator chat. once you kind of reach the creator, whatever milestone, you can kind of access this and you can talk to like an actual person one-on-one. And I found it's like pretty helpful. They can't really help you with like major things, but I do think that it's nice that they have that in place. It's kind of like the least they could do, but they do have that.
Well, that's good to know, and good to be aware of. Pivoting slightly to maybe something a little more fun and less consequential, I'm very interested in like the small details of like what goes into being a YouTuber. And one thing I'm obsessed with is looking at people's thumbnails on videos, because it seems, I talked a lot about this with Shannon Strucci when Shannon was on the podcast, and one of the things we were talking about is the level of thought that goes into the creation of a thumbnail. And I was wondering if I like your thumbnails on your videos, and I was wondering if you had a philosophy or thoughts on what makes a good thumbnail and whether you think those are important to the video itself.
Yeah, totally. It is so hard. I feel like the more I do it, the more difficult it gets to make a good thumbnail. So my partner makes them for me now. He works in advertising and he like has a lot of experience with Photoshop. So I've kind of left that to him, but we collaborate on each thumbnail. And I used to make my own. I did like a lot of research before I started making videos about kind of what draws people's attention on YouTube and what kind of like, garners views, like what kind of visuals do that. And like I kind of found out that, like people are very drawn to faces. So a face in a thumbnail will garner a lot more views than like, I don't know, an inanimate object, for example. Apparently like hypersaturation, like hypersaturated imagery does a lot. I kind of like to play with like focus in the thumbnails and kind of like hyper focusing on something. We're getting there. We haven't mastered that yet, but I do like kind of like isolating something out of a background and just kind of finding a good balance between that and also like very eye-catching text, because like I think font, like I feel very fixated on font these days because of kind of making these videos. When I watch movies now, I'm like, oh, that font, which is so annoying for people who watch movies with me. But yeah, I think that finding like a nice sleek font that's like very accessible for people is good, and just kind of figuring out like what you want in the text are all kind of things to think about. But yeah, it's definitely a balancing act, and a good thumbnail goes a long way.
So much goes into the creation of your videos, clearly, right? They're 30, 40 minutes, ties so many things together. But I think so often start with a focus on a single media object, whether it's like a film or a television show or what have you. And I've noticed that the titles of your videos typically focus on that one media object, but of course there's so much more happening in your videos beyond that one thing. I'm wondering what your philosophy is on creating a title. Like, do you ever feel that the title doesn't fully capture the essence of the video, or is that the wrong way to think about it?
No, it makes sense. Yeah, it's kind of weird because like you kind of in a way have to think about like SEO when you're making like search engine optimization, when you're making a title. In a way, I'm not super savvy with that, but like kind of starting with like where, what, when, why, how, and like those kind of words, and kind of using these very casual phrases and like shorter phrases really help with titles. But yeah, I tend to like, I don't know, you don't want to get too academic as well. Like you don't want to fall into like the whatever clause kind of thing, or like name of the thing, very long thing related to it. So it's kind of a balance between that. But yeah, I like to focus kind of on the media object because that's what's going to garner like a niche audience or like whatever, kind of like an audience for that. And then that'll kind of be like an entry point to these more esoteric topics on top of that. So like that's kind of like my philosophy for approaching the channel in general, is just kind of using media as kind of an entry point to academia. Sometimes I do that better than others. Like sometimes I think I'm just taking a media object and then just applying one theory to it. And I think that's kind of limiting. But I've been trying to get better at kind of creating like a more expansive argument around said media object, I guess.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And in talking about the academic, so I would say the audience of this show is probably primarily skews more towards academic and the kind of the video essay making or videographic criticism that is, being made at an academic level. And one of the conversations that is happening among academic video essayists is talking about the in-video citations, as insofar as it's very common to cite an academic written source in a video essay, but it is perhaps less common to cite another video essay within a video and to kind of build that, those layers of citation that are so common in, written scholarship. One thing I really appreciate about your videos is that you're constantly quoting and citing the work of other YouTube video essayists. And I think there's actually a lot that academic video essayists can learn from your videos and from YouTube video essayists as far as, seeing what else is out there in the field. And we're going to transition shortly to your video, The Liberal Escapism of Bridgerton. And you do this in that video where you say others have said this better than I, or have said it in this way, and you incorporate those videos. My question for you is, how important is that in the work that you do? How do you think about that? And how do those, it seems to me that does a really great job of making your videos feel like they're part of a community and part of a conversation of all these different people going back and forth. Is that partially how you think about it?
Yeah, I think with especially like academic video essays, we're kind of, the rules of academia aren't applying to academic video essayists on YouTube. So like I could almost plagiarize someone's work in like an essay and not be penalized for it by like the academic institution, because like I just don't operate in that sphere, or like my video is not a part of that sphere. So I think trying to like approach YouTube as kind of like a literature, or like as a sort of discourse in itself, and like as an academic discourse, is a helpful way to kind of give credit to people. I think that like if you're going to be looking at, when you're making a video, you don't want to make a video about a completely random, you want to make a video that's original and not a topic that everyone's already made a video about. So you're already going to be scoping out the literature. And so it is kind of like, approaching an essay like you don't want to be, or a study, like you don't want to be making a study that someone else made. So I think if you're going to be doing like the literature review on YouTube, you should be acknowledging what the other lenses on this subject are. Certain times it's more like necessary than others. But I think even for the Bridgerton one, like there are more imminent problems than the one I was discussing in my video, but it just wasn't necessary for me to talk about them, nor was it even like my place in some ways to talk about those issues. So like, yeah, it's better to direct someone's attention elsewhere. So yeah, I think it depends on like how much their topic overlaps and how much it kind of has informed your video. Like I recently cited Be Kind Free Wine's video because I got my entire video idea from her video. So it's kind of like, it depends on how like relevant it is to the subject at hand, I guess.
Right. And I think it also, there is this is somewhat founded, but I think the take that, like if you go on film Twitter, for example, and you listen to like, generalizations made by people about the kind of work that is on YouTube, it seems like a lot of people be like, oh, on YouTube, it's just these like hot takes of people like trying to say that their view is the definitive take on this film or the definitive reading or what have you. And it seems to be by, I don't think that's true for a ton of videos on YouTube, but it seems to me like that citation really is pushing back on that by saying it's a subtle reminder, like, hey, I'm just one person providing, or a couple of people providing one perspective or multiple perspectives on this media object, but hey, go here, consider this is what I'm thinking about. And it really seems to me to be opening a conversation and continuing a conversation instead of closing one off. One follow-up question that I had was, not only do you refer to other videos in your work, but you refer to videos that you've yourself have made in the past that kind of make it seem like you're having this ongoing dialogue with yourself. Like I think at one point in The Liberal Escapism of Bridgerton, you say something like, well, we're back to this topic of neoliberalism again. Like, we're talking about it here. How do you approach that? Do you see your body of work as a continuation of certain things and them interact with one another? Do you try not to do that and move your work in different directions? Is it a balancing act, or does it just kind of happen the way it happens?
I just, the more I've done this, the more I've realized, like, wow, I have 3 things I talk about. It's neoliberalism, the 2008 recession, and Ronald Reagan. Like, I can't stop talking about that. And so when I referenced neoliberalism, because a lot of my subscribers did come from the Parasite video, which is basically just neoliberalism bad, the video. I just wanted to be self-aware about it because I don't want to sound like I'm repeating myself. I even noticed that in my writing, I kind of repeat like my whatever writing patterns a lot. So I'm trying to break out of that. But yeah, I think it is good to kind of reference your earlier work and build upon it because, like, yeah, again, if we're approaching this like academia, like you always want to be kind of updating your work and kind of. I think that if you can't be self-reflexive about your own work, then like you're not very good at writing essays. That sounds really harsh. I just think that it's important to always think about, where you went wrong, where you could do better, and kind of challenge your former ideas about things and your former arguments. Because like a lot of the time in my videos, I do kind of make mistakes and I do kind of speak hyperbolically or whatever, make assumptions. And I think it's good to kind of be aware of that. And especially if you have a public platform, like I think it's important that people know you're aware of that and that you have evidence of being self-aware of this. So yeah, I kind of approach it like that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. First of all, I don't know how old you are, but I know I am a child of neoliberalism myself and of this current age. So I think it's fucked us up enough that we have a right to talk about it as often and as we want and forever. So no, I don't think you're like over repeating yourself literally at all. But speaking of repeating myself, I'm constantly quoting the scholar and video essayist Catherine Grant, who talks about how video essayists work in the flow of the internet and, of online culture, and how we're constantly just kind of putting stuff out there as it happens and as it goes. And of course, along the way, you're gonna change your mind or continue to develop new ideas and to keep building. And I think that's healthy and good. And I think it would be a problem if people weren't reflective in that way, as you say. And so I think that's great. And as I said, you have one of those moments in the liberal escapism of Bridgerton. So I think now could be a good time. We've been kind of dancing around some things that happen in that video. So perhaps it could be a good time to transition to it. And so, in the video, you provide a pretty comprehensive overview of how you came to the subject. But I'm wondering if you could give us a more kind of technical behind the scenes background story of how this video essay came into being.
So essentially, this is one of the only videos that actually has an origin story or like an interesting one. Not even that interesting. But yeah, I kind of have been wanting to kind of segue into writing for a while now. Like not yet, but just in the future, I kind of want to, start building a portfolio for myself and like practicing writing for publications. So I submitted this article to a website called No Film School. I feel like you might know it, but it's kind of like, yeah, this big website. So I submitted an article and it was about kind of, escapism and how it's becoming used a lot more in terms of deflecting criticism against media, and how I think that it kind of poses a danger to like the future of art and whatnot. And it mainly came out of the fact that I had just watched Emily in Paris, which like is a whole mess. And I had also watched Bridgerton at the same time. And I was like, why does Netflix keep churning out garbage and then pretending it's good and letting everyone kind of write it off as escapism? Because, I watched a lot of Sex and the City, and like it does have its own problems in many ways. But at the same time, like it's still a very well-written piece of media and does have an interesting thing to say about the culture that, people were living in at the time. And it's still escapism. Like, I think it is great and escapist, but it is also good. And so I think that's where kind of the contradiction lies. And so from there, I just couldn't get my mind off of the fact that Bridgerton was so popular, and I was just kind of annoyed about it. And I just started thinking a lot about this kind of difficult question of hollow representation. I think it's something no one wants to talk about. But I think we're kind of in this age where we're kind of giving people the diversity that, people have asked for and also need, and is, very long overdue, but we're giving it to them in these really half-assed attempts at, art. And I think it's insulting. And I think Bridgerton, for me, was one of those examples. But of course, I'm not necessarily like a person of color. So I think it's very difficult to kind of come in and just talk about these things on behalf of people. So I kind of thought it was an interesting challenge for me to kind of juggle these ideas without kind of taking up too much room. I don't know. I think it's a very gray subject matter. So I think I just kind of wanted to explore it and kind of unpack it, if you will. And so that's kind of how I came to the video idea.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And did you end up writing an article about it? And if you did, what were you able to do in the video that you weren't unable to do in the article? Like, could you talk through the differences between the two?
Totally. So the article also kind of talks about Emily in Paris. So it is a bit more of a broad subject and more about escapism, whereas Bridgerton my video kind of covers a few lenses on the subject. The article had an 800-word limit. So already there, it's kind of difficult to get things across. But at the same time, I was able to kind of integrate older media in my video, and kind of it was just a lot more flexible with what I could integrate and talk about. And I think music played a big role. Like, I wanted to include that Beatles song, which you can't really get across in an article. So I think that there's just kind of many things at work. And also in answer to your question about why I chose it for today, I've been kind of ashamed of the video ever since I posted it, because the audio of myself in the video is dubbed. Because my in-person audio was so bad that I had to dub it. And someone actually commented and they were like, your voice is very dry. So either you're dubbing it or like something else, whatever. They mentioned something else. They were like, I'm an audio engineer, so I would know this. And I was like,
oh my God.
And so now looking back, it's like the production's just so off. Like the lighting's off. I'm blurry, like whatever. I filmed it all myself on this like really bad camera. So whatever. But then I rewatched it recently and I was like, oh, I actually kind of like this. I think that I struck a pretty good I kind of found a way to kind of wrestle with these many different ideas I was having at the time and kind of bring it all into like a cohesive whole. So I was actually quite proud of it. So I thought it'd be one that kind of was like the richest text to talk about today.
Yeah, no, for sure. First of all, I didn't notice that at all. And even if I did, even if I had noticed that, it would have made me like the video even more. And I already like it a lot, because it's like, that's what I love about this shit, is it's like creators who don't have these like huge teams or whatever. It's like we're just trying to get this shit that's inside of our heads out there. You know what I mean? And so I really respect that. And I think, you had one, there were so many great moments in the video that I definitely plan on stealing in conversations with people when we talk about this. And one of them was like, you talk a lot about how these stories hide behind this sense of escapism and are very selective in when they want to be like based on a true story and when they're just trying to like recreate something new. And as you say, kind of try half-heartedly to address issues of race and representation that people have been, advocating for years. And you say, well, if it's true escapism, why not change their name? Like, why not change King George III's name? And I thought it was I thought it was like the way you built up to that, it just kind of like hit me in the head, and I was like, wow, like that just really stuck with me. And I'm wondering when you're writing a script, and maybe you didn't think that was like an aha moment when you were writing it or built to it, I don't know, but that's how it felt to me. When you're writing a script, how do you build up to certain points in a way that you make sure that you're getting them across clearly to your audience? Because there seems to be perhaps like a cadence to your voice, or just the general flow of things that's kind of like information. Here's the point, the takeaway. Is that how you think of it or structure it, or do you agree with the way I'm talking about it?
Yeah. So, well, when I first am writing a script, like I write down basically every idea that I could think of in like just a bunch of jot notes at the top of the document. So I kind of keep those as a reference, but I do really try to write in stream of consciousness. Like I've always kind of done this. And I just don't like to stop and think about what I'm writing at all, because I think that's when I kind of get stuck. So I like to write out like a really messy draft of whatever is in my brain. And that's kind of where I get the flow. And then I can go back and plug in quotes, or I can plug in like, structure it more cohesively. But that's just kind of how I like to approach the writing, because I think you need kind of a mixture of both, like having structure and having like a distinct, schematic argument, but then also not having to overthink it, I think is important. And also having like a creative kind of process with it as well.
Right. And there are certain times where you use text on screen, and it seems to be like you'll say the question out loud and then it will appear, and it's typically a question or a point that it seems like you really want to emphasize, or that could get at the heart of the video, or is maybe like the beginning of a chapter. So when do you decide to kind of emphasize text on screen in this video? Like what function does that serve?
Yeah, so I do like to separate it into chapters, and just kind of that helps both with the music portion, because I'm very bad at mixing music, so I just like to stop and start with each chapter a new song. So that helps with that, and kind of giving people like a visual framework for the essay, because they're not reading it. And then in terms of putting the text on screen randomly, I think the video has like 3 questions at the end that I ask in like a row. But it tends to be questions that are kind of like the central thesis of the video, or like the central like research question, basically. And I think those are ones that I want people to think about. And I think that if I'm just asking it in audio format, I don't think it would digest as well. So I think putting it on screen just helps people, like, what you were saying, really get across to people that I think this is important, as opposed to whatever else I'm saying.
That makes a lot of sense. And mentally, as I was watching, I appreciated kind of the chapters, and being able to really, think through the different parts, and then have those questions at the end to kind of, tie me back together. You tie so much together in this, like TV, film, voluntarism, I wrote them down, neoliberalism, questions of historicity, the way Disney handles its archive representation, race, racism, other video essays, all of these things. I've never made anything close to this. I don't know if I could, but I imagine there must be some kind of balance that you think about when you're making a video, to not include too much information or lose a sense of direction, and that there must be some type of balancing act to make sure that you stay on course. And if that's true, how do you strike that balance and make sure you are not including too much information for the audience?
I do think the chapters help with that. Like, I think that because it's also not an essay that's being graded, like a lot of these would not do that well if I was submitting it to a teacher, because they're so like, they break so many rules. But I think separating into chapters really helps kind of categorize your arguments. I do think this video is the one that tackles the most disparate ideas, but I'm not really sure. I think it's just always good. Like, I have script editor, like my partner edits my scripts, and then my friend Sarah, and they kind of go through, and every time before they go through the script, I just ask them, like, can you make sure, or can you let me know where I'm kind of deviating from the point, or can you let me know if there's like a through line throughout the script and it's not too all over the place. And sometimes it's a bigger struggle than others, especially with longer videos. But I think it's just important to have like a second look at it, and for people to kind of go through and just tell you what's up, basically.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And your answer there actually reminds me of a question that I meant to ask earlier in the conversation. So this is a good moment. And that is, you have collaborators on your videos. At the end of yours, give research credits or script supervisor credits or what have you. And you mentioned that this is your full-time job. So I imagine, there's a lot of production that goes into these things and making sure that they're good. What does your collaborative process look like? Like, who do you work with, and how does that shape the videos? Like, how much of it is you, and then how much of it is working with other people? And I'm sure each video is different, but just I'd be curious to get a general sense of what that's like. Mm-hmm.
So they all have different roles. My friend Hannah, she kind of started out, she was in my Sofia Coppola video, and she's like my best friend. I live with her, and we both have like very similar ideas about things. And I asked her to be in the Coppola video because Sofia Coppola is her favorite filmmaker. And I was like, she just needs to be in this. So that kind of is where the collaborative element started. And she mainly focuses on, because I kind of try to focus on also what they want to put on their resume. Because they're my friends, like I honestly just want to help them out if I can. And so Sarah is more focused because I think she did cultural studies in school, but so she's more focused kind of on the theory aspect of things. She does a lot of like the more theory-based research. And then Hannah does a lot of the kind of, I don't know how to describe it. Like she goes through kind of like the more tangible research, kind of like the basic facts of, what the media is that I'm talking about. And then she also builds the sets because I can't do that. And she also is part of she's all my whole production team, basically. She also films it. So she's doing a lot of that. And then Nick, of course, is doing the thumbnails, and he's like my main script editor because he's, like a copywriter. So he's important to have. But I think, for the most part, it is me. Like, I'm writing the script. I'm mostly editing it. Like, I edit it before they see it. I'm editing the video, which is like, I can't even describe to you how exhaustive this last video was. Like, I worked for 14 hours yesterday just editing like the final parts of it. So it's pretty exhaustive. I am doing most of the work. It is still me, because if it wasn't still me, I don't think I would just be the face of it. Like, I would have more people in it. But yeah, so it's pretty collaborative in terms of like they're really good support for just kind of like the stuff that is just way too much for me to handle. And stuff that, is in my expertise. Like, I can't build my own set. Hannah is like very creative and artistic. And she wants to kind of maybe go into that in the future. So that's helpful. And then like, yeah, Nick is just good at editing. So it's like those kind of things. I think we kind of separate the jobs that way.
That makes a lot of sense. And, your latest video I should plug, because I think I'm going to be released. We're recording this on September 29th, and my goal is to release it tomorrow. And because I've been lazy and not released a podcast this month. So that's going to be my goal. But the Love Island Flirtation with Surveillance is the latest video, which I have not watched yet, but I look forward to watching this evening. No, I'm excited. And, actually, in your video on the problem of method acting, you interview one of your friends, right, who works as an actor, and your friend, she kind of functions as like an expert that you bring in to talk about the method, right? And so it is great to see how you tie in people in your own life to make these videos happen. But as you say, it's clear you're the driving force behind them.
I'm surrounded by ridiculously talented people. Like, everyone around me has like we went to art school, so literally everyone is so talented and amazing. So I could not have them in it.
Yeah, actually, that reminds me of another question that I forgot to ask you, which is what is your background? Like, did you study filmmaking or cinema studies, or what did you? Yeah, what's your background in that respect?
So I went to my undergrad was in political science, which is funny, and then my grad program it's kind of a mixture between communication studies and cultural studies. It's more on the cultural studies side of things. So I think that's kind of where most of my video knowledge has come from, because poli-sci, it doesn't really have much practical application to the videos. But yeah, so I didn't study filmmaking. A lot of my friends did, which is actually really ironic, but not me.
I started off as a poli-sci major, so I can relate, and maybe I like to think that it helps me in ways I don't even realize, like maybe somewhere in the back of my head.
Hello, fellow nerd. I just love politics.
Yeah. Wait, do you mind if I ask where you're in grad school now? Are you in grad school now?
Yeah. So no, I actually just graduated, but I was at Ryerson University. So I was there. And now I'm not. And now I have to figure out what I want to do with my life. But we'll figure that out.
Relate super hard. Getting back to you, and I love hearing that you have a friend who does the sets and helps you with the production. One of the things that I definitely come to associate with the we might call it the YouTube aesthetic, or ways that people make video essays on YouTube, is the creator appearing in front of the camera during their video. And in this video and throughout your work, you appear throughout at different points. And I had no idea that you dubbed, which is hilarious, because as I was watching, I was like, wow, the sound in her part must be incredible, because it sounds exactly the same, which is so stupid for me to think in hindsight, but that's how your dubbing really fooled me. Yeah, no, it was good. Why is this an effective, stylistic choice for you in your videos? And when do you decide is the best points in the narration for you to appear on screen?
So I actually like my videos more when I'm not in them. part of the reason I'm in them, half of the reason is because I'm narcissistic and I like dressing up for the videos. And the other half is because sponsors really prefer you to have a face, which I know is so capitalistic, but that is basically kind of half and half the reason. I do like dressing up, but filming in person is an absolute nightmare. I don't enjoy it, and I feel really awkward on camera. But typically, I'm trying to get better at it because I think that I come a little bit too infrequently in the videos, that it's a bit random. So I'm trying to find a better way to integrate that and maybe get better sound so I'm just talking the whole time. So essentially, I basically look at the script, and whichever parts are more casual, I'll say to the camera. And then whichever parts are more like whatever academic, I'll say via audio. I don't think a lot. I don't think enough about it, about the in-person parts before I make the video, which is why sometimes it looks like I'm kind of just reciting a weird part of an essay, because I am. So I'm going to try to get better at that. I've been looking at a lot of ContraPoints' videos recently. I don't want to copy her, but she does a really amazing job of kind of being on camera and kind of having that balance between being on camera and being casual and then being off camera. So I've been trying to figure that out. It's difficult.
I'm about to ask a question that's going to make me sound so lame, and I promise that I'm not lame. But it seems to me that humor is an important function in your videos. And I know that makes me sound like a literal robot, but I noticed that sometimes like the cutaways to yourself are like the funniest moments. Like, is it in this video where you're holding your cat? Or in one in one of your videos, like you're doing that, and again, this like maybe I'll even cut this question out in the end because maybe it'll just sound so lame. But like, why is humor important? It's just like that like tongue-in-cheek humor style is like, it's more than just you being funny. Like, it's almost like something we come to expect from YouTube video essays. Is that true? That sounds so lame, but hopefully you know what I'm getting at.
Yeah. I find that mainly it's because I just don't like being self-serious in my personal life. And I didn't want a lot of my friends when I first started making videos to find out about the channel, because none of us are earnest at all. Like, we are all so buried in irony that we cannot fathom being earnest. It's so embarrassing for all of us. So I was very embarrassed about it. And like, my early videos are so self-serious. Like, I cannot watch the Parasite one. It's so embarrassing. So I try to I wanted to be entertaining for people. And I think, you know, part of the reason I loved Lindsay Ellis when I first started watching YouTube was that she's really good at being funny. Like, she's just genuinely funny. And her videos are just a fun experience to watch. Like, they're not too academic. They feel casual. It feels like your friend is telling you about a movie they just saw. And I think that's kind of what I want to go for. It sounds like I'm just directly copying these people, but like, I'm trying to find my own kind of originality with it. And I think I am funny in my personal life, so I want to try to be funny in this. It's hard, though. I don't think it always works. But yeah, I think it's just important to keep people engaged, and like if you have a joke about a certain piece of media, like, they're going to remember that. And if it's like a smart joke, they're going to remember the smart joke better than they are your, I don't know, dumb academic argument. So it's good to kind of have a mixture.
Definitely. I relate so hard to what you just said. And you said it way better than I could have. And I should have phrased my question like that.
Dumb academic argument.
No, but I think it's less about like me trying to be like, why is humor funny? And more like, I think you're so right that like that lack of earnestness and that level of irony, again, relate hard to that in my own personal relationships. But also, I think you are right that I think we are just drawn to people who don't take themselves too seriously and who can be self-deprecating. And so it makes total sense, like, why that is, you know, a part of it. And then I think it's like those moments allow you to talk about neoliberalism or whatever in such an accessible way. So I think that makes so much sense. And well, speaking of people that you have been influenced by, or as you say that you're, you know, let's transition to segment 3, because segment 3 is when we talk about a video essay that you've selected for us to talk about. And when I initially DM'd you on Twitter and was like, you want to come on my podcast? Like, here are the instructions. You originally had selected a different video essay for us to talk about. And then you ultimately changed because you said that you wanted to pick a piece that was more formative for you and that kind of was more influential. And I think think I relate so hard to what you said about when you're just trying to figure this out, like trying to find people who you seek to be inspired by and emulate as you try to figure out how do you do whatever it is that you're doing. So I'm super excited to talk about the video essay that you've selected for us to talk about. Would you mind introducing it for the audience and telling us why you selected it for us to talk about today?
Yes. So yeah, I chose Treasure Planet, Disney's Biggest Mistake by BREADSWORD. Yeah, I had initially chosen another video because I think I'm just trying to figure out, I did like a Q&A a while back and people were annoyed that I didn't, someone asked about my favorite YouTubers and I didn't say enough small YouTubers. And like, obviously I want to use my platform to promote smaller YouTubers. And this person I was so excited for because they made this video and it just went viral and whatever. So I that was why I chose that original video, because I thought it was great and like wanted to support them. But I do think it was harder for me to talk about at length. So I figured I'd choose BREADSWORDs because this is something that I tried to think about a video that I've watched multiple times, and I've watched this video so many times. I love it. I just think it's so wonderful. I've said this a bunch in different things, but like I just find BREADSWORD so good at writing about what he loves. Like I think that a lot of video essays are negative, like mine are typically like, you know, they're critical of the media they're talking about, and it's so much harder to be to write about media that you love and to write about why you love it. And I think he does such a good job of that. And just for a first essay, like for a first video, this is so impressive. Like he hits his stylistic notes so early on in his like YouTube career. And he kind of, I don't know, he just feels very like sure of himself considering this is the first video. It's so like impeccably edited. The audio quality is amazing, which is like rare. I can attest to that. And it's just wonderful. I just think it's a wonderful, lovely video.
I hadn't realized that it was the first video. That makes it even more amazing. And, you know, we'll give a plug to the other video before we continue that you had mentioned. I believe it was Brave was a disappointment by
E-Licorice, I think.
E-Licorice, yes. So check out that video as well. Getting back on track to the video that you selected for us to talk about. Do you remember when was the first time you watched it? And do you remember what the reaction you had to it was then? Like, would you cite this video as one that encouraged you to want to start doing this yourself? Because I believe this was released in 2017, and you said that you had started kind of dabbling in 2018. So was this an early influence for you?
Yes, it was. Oh my God, I think he just has this really great intro where he's just very moody. Like his videos have he really sets the mood of the video really well. And I think it has this really wonderful intro and then build up. And then the title sequence happens and he has this Marvin Gaye song play. And I was like, it's so wild to have a Marvin Gaye song in application to this video about Treasure Planet. Like that's so interesting. And I just think that his videos are so sleek and sophisticated, and I just really liked that about them. They're so stylized, and you can see kind of his own personal interests kind of seep through all of his videos, especially this one, with like his musical interests and like his aesthetic choices and like his his exit animation, like all of these things kind of come together in his videos. And so that really inspired me because like I kind of wanted to do that. Like I have a lot of interests and I kind of want to seep that into my videos as well. And like I want to get that out there. And it feels kind of like a little personal ode to something you like. So yeah, I think it was incredibly influential for me. That sounds so pretentious, but yeah, no, I think it very much inspired me. I think it was the video that inspired me to start making videos.
Wow, that's fantastic. And as you say, you really can feel that the personal nature to it. And I think something about Treasure Planet couldn't not be personal, right? Because just the simple fact that he's making a video about Treasure Planet and not like The Incredibles, which I also love, but it's just, you know, it's clearly being made from a deep personal place, right? Because it's trying to champion and bring attention to, you know, his own passions and understanding of the world. And I definitely see his influence on your work, for sure. I really do see the similarities between them. One of the things that I think about this video and your videos is like the rhythm of them and how you establish a rhythm with the editing. And one of the things that I'm always curious about is, there are moments in your videos and in this video where you focus on like a single specific thing in the video that you're talking about, right? Like whether it's like this specific shot or this angle or something that happens. But there are other times where you're showing images that are kind of related to what you're talking about, but are just kind of images to accompany the main point that you're trying to make in the script. And it seems to me that this video does a really good job of maintaining that rhythm and providing images that don't distract you or that don't take your attention away from like the point that's being made. I feel that this video does a very good job of doing that, and I'm wondering, as a creator yourself, is that something that you think about? Like, not saying that there are images that matter less in a certain video, but it seems like there are moments in each video where the image isn't the main point of emphasis. And so how do you decide what to edit and what to put in those moments?
Well, BREADSWORD, I think, does a better job of this in terms of kind of, he's not afraid to use like very extra diegetic images. Like he'll use images like from, I don't know, like random movies and random shows that have absolutely nothing to do with what he's talking about, but like vaguely kind of reference it, and it still kind of works the way he does it. And I think it's really fun and specific to his style. It's a bit harder for me in my videos because they're kind of academic and because most of the time I'm not specifically referencing a shot. Like it's happened in a couple videos, like my Point Break video where I kind of try to break down a scene, and like creators like Every Frame of Painting and like all of those people really focus on like the specifics of what they're talking about. But like because mine are so general, most of the images I'm taking are just kind of referential, but they can't be so random as to like completely untether my point. So it depends on what it is. This last video I did was like, the reason it took so long to make was because, Love Island has 7 seasons and 50 plus episodes a season, and nothing happens. Like that's the whole point. Barely anything happens. So like you're just sifting through and trying to find content that kind of like symbolizes what you mean, but isn't the exact thing you're talking about. And that's really difficult to find that balance. I think sourcing clips is like the absolute hardest part of making the video, because like that's another essay on its own, is just the sequence of clips that you're showing. And so I think it's really difficult to kind of get that right. I don't think I always do. And sometimes you'll put a clip in and someone will be like, I can't believe you showed a clip of this person when you were saying that thing. And you're like, oh shoot, like I just wanted to put a clip there. I didn't realize that had like, significance, but it's a signifier of what you're talking about. So you actually really do have to think about what you're putting where.
Right. One of the things that we talk about a lot on this show is wanting to avoid just giving like an illustrated lecture, right? Where you're just reading an essay aloud and essentially just putting pictures to it. When you're editing, how much of the script is written when you start actually editing the video and using Premiere or what have you? And how much interplay is there between the two? Like how much is the actual video editing influencing the script itself and vice versa?
Ooh, it's fully written when I do, because I don't think I'm savvy enough of an editor. I have the script fully planned out, and like I have every single sentence associated with a different clip. Like we timestamp the script, so it's like completely littered with stuff. But I do want to get I try to get dynamic with the way that like with showing audio clips, for example, in between different things. I really try to avoid just showing images, because I think that is a huge part of like lectures, is just showing like an image and putting a Ken Burns on it. And so I think, or Ken Burns, whatever, Zoom on it. And I really try to avoid that. Like I always want it to be moving in some way. But yeah, I'm pretty rigid with it. I want to get better at that because I want to just be a better editor in general. And I think a lot of that comes down to experimenting. I completely agree. Like it's you don't want to come across like you're just doing a lecture with visuals. So I think my partners talked a lot about that just with me, is just kind of like finding a way to flow it better and make it more engaging rather than just like, this is this. So I'm still working on that at the moment, I think.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. And, getting back to this video, I think one of the things that I most appreciate about there's certain things that he's doing here in this video that you couldn't do in a traditional written essay. Like there's one part where he's essentially doing I'm not well educated on how animation works, but he does a great job of just talking through the mechanics of animation and how
the rotoscoping. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And in visualizing that in a way that is very digestible and easy to understand that you couldn't so easily do with the in a written essay. Or maybe you could, but someone like me, I would have no clue how to really understand that or truly get it. And so it seems one of the things I appreciate most about this video is that it's teaching you as it's making its argument, right? And it's doing both of them simultaneously, which I imagine must be a really hard thing to try and balance, and a big responsibility when you're putting out. I mean, this video has like 6 million views or something like that, So really, it seems to me to be very deliberate in the way that it's thinking about its audience and trying to say, okay, I'm going to make an argument for people of all varying levels of familiarity with how animation works and the mechanics of Disney Studios, how it works, it monetizes things. I really appreciated that about the video.
Yeah, he's really guiding you kind of in real time, like he's narrating the video in real time, or at least he kind of like creates the illusion of that, maybe. I remember there's this like one moment that I always remember from the video is when he's like, this scene is so amazing, like just look at it. And like it's such an active phrase to be like, just look at this scene. And then he shows you the scene and you're like, wow, it is amazing. And I think a lot of it is because he's like, look at this scene. So I think it's a lot of like using active language, targeting the viewer, kind of like snapping their attention back towards what you're talking about. He does a really good job of that. I completely agree.
Yeah, or like there's one part where he's like kind of prepping you for this like really cool jump cut, and it's like when the kid is like under the blanket and then it cuts him.
That's the one.
Oh, that's what you're talking about. Yeah. And it was like, I had the same reaction where I was like, damn, that jump cut is pretty cool, And it almost seemed to me also the video is just like a good reminder to like, I think not often enough when I'm watching perhaps an animated film like that, am I thinking through the mechanics of how it works and how those works like do utilize, film language and film technique. And in that way, the video is also just kind of using Treasure Planet to make a case for like how we view and interact with animated films more generally.
Yeah, it introduced to me like the idea of like, we're not just looking at like a painting, like there is a camera associated with this, like that's following, like it uses camera techniques, like that Disney's using camera techniques in this movie that you just would never think about because it's animated, but like there's so much that goes into it.
Yeah, for sure. One thing that I appreciate about this video and so many of your videos is, for lack of a better word, like the political nature of them, right? And thinking through like the world in which the media object exists and the economic and social forces that surround it. I'm wondering what you think the role of the video essayist is in trying to incorporate those videos, incorporate those aspects in their work. Like, do you think there's an obligation there to do that whenever one can, or do you think that's just your style? Like, what are your thoughts on escapism in video essays? I guess because there's certainly high levels of that exist.
Well, I guess this is where my political science brain has come into things, but I'm of the mind that everything is political. All media is political and it exists in a political space. So that's kind of how I myself approach my videos. Like, and because I'm in cultural studies, like everything is situated culturally. Everything has a cultural significance, whatever. I don't necessarily think it's like everyone's duty to take a political approach to media, but there is something inherent to media criticism about that makes it political. I love when people like comment on my videos and they're like, oh my god, it's just a movie, like stop overthinking it, don't make everything political. And you're like, this is my whole job, why are you watching a video essay? So I think there is a distinction though between like video essays, like in my niche, video essayists who kind of make more cultural commentaries on videos, and then video essayists like, I don't know, every frame of a painting or like lessons from the screenplay that are more kind of the technical like film brain side of things. Like I don't have a film brain. I can't really look at, like I can't do what they do and look at how like this the significance of this shot, for example. So I think that there's like a pretty hard line between those two sides of like the film video essay community.
To that point, you mentioned that, and we've touched on this at certain parts, but it's a question I just want to come back to because if anything, it's the reason why I started this podcast was to try and figure this out and bring on people who are smarter than me to help me figure out this question, which is, you mentioned that you wanted to become a writer or you are a writer and that you're trying to build your portfolio and write more. What is it, because I think you're right. What I come to this from a film studies background, and a lot of the things I'm interested in are kind of like the film aesthetics and things like that. And I think that's perhaps more what I associate with this kind of work. But as you're here and demonstrating, there's a whole another way of thinking about it. As you think about, in the majority of the people in my space, in the academic space, are people in like film and television studies backgrounds, and of course people in media studies and cultural studies or what have you. But one of the things we talk about is how this format can be brought into a wide variety of academic disciplines. And I think if you engage with moving image, media, whether you're like a cable television scholar or, a scholar, whatever kind of media, engaging in audiovisual forms, I think is something you can and should be doing in one form or another. And I'm wondering, what is it about your video essays that you think you would not be able to capture in writing? As far, apart from you can self-publish a 40-minute video, but you couldn't just submit like a 16,000 word script or something to a publication. Like, what is it about the form itself that makes it so compelling and able to reach so many people? Because I would imagine there are YouTube videos of yours that get thousands of more views than written articles, even in major publications about similar topics. Like, what is it about your videos and the form itself?
I think a lot of it comes down to mood. Like, I think that film is like inherently like affective, like it instills affect within the viewer. It's like evocative. And I think, it's so much easier to build an argument when you also have like music building below it and like certain tones, like kind of getting the right tone for different things. Like if you're talking about someone who died, you don't want to have happy music playing beneath it. And I think that like all of that kind of contributes to creating this kind of mood within the viewer. And like, it's almost a lot easier to kind of like give your argument a flow when it's kind of a more affective medium. Like I think it's also just more personal. Like I think it's more personal than like a piece of writing, because I have control over so many of the different elements. Like you're getting a piece of what I think is important in every single part of the video that I couldn't get across to you in writing. I think it's like a lot less clinical. Obviously, writing is very powerful. And like, I don't want to denounce, like, obviously books are amazing, like go read, but I do think that this is kind of like a really interesting new avenue for writing because of this kind of affective elements to it.
I couldn't agree more. And on that note, I think is a beautiful way to end our conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me and for reaching out.